Welcome to RotoWire Fantasy Football Live. Another exciting day. Again, we're on 5 days a week, 11 a.m. Eastern on RotoWire YouTube. Obviously, if you missed the show, you'll always catch the replay, so we're good there. During the preseason, Thursday and Friday off, so I'll be out the next 2 days, back on the weekend. I will be on the SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Channel 87 tonight, Wednesday night. 8 to 10 Eastern. So join me for that, and we'll have a good time on XM if you have XM. If you've been liking the show, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. If you're watching on RotoWire YouTube, helps the bosses know that you value the show and helps me out. If you haven't been able to follow me on socials, please give me a follow at Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter or X. I'm doing player profile threads every day. Put a Christian Watson one up about a half hour ago, maybe less. Finally, end of the show. Stay tuned. Joe Bartle of RotoWire is coming on to talk about training camp news, players he's targeting in 2023 fantasy football drafts. All right, let's start out with the news of the day. I talked about this a bit yesterday. Just want to bring it up again. Anthony Richardson is the starting quarterback, and that makes a difference because week one, he will be in there. And so when you're drafting, if you're still drafting in some best ball leagues, it's a great pick of Anthony Richardson because we know it is running. There are going to be some real big spike weeks. If you wait outside the top 9 quarterbacks in regular redraft leagues, Richardson, I believe, with his rushing floor, is a very viable pick outside the top 9 quarterbacks because realistically, the other quarterbacks are very good ones. Geno Smith played well last year. Aaron Rodgers is, still a superstar in his own way. But we're going to see varying production. When those teams can run the ball, they will. So there's going to be a lot of variance, and there's not a lot of running. Geno ran a little bit last year, but realistically, I don't know how much we can count on that, especially with the weapons around him in both the running and the passing game. Richardson with that rushing floor, and I'm going to say this again, I say it every single year, in that window of time when Tim Tebow was a starting quarterback, he was a solid QB1. If you can run the football, it is a cheat code in fantasy football. It has been, it always will be, unless the scoring systems change. So knowing Richardson's out there week one, I do believe, again, outside the top 9 quarterbacks, you definitely would target him at that point. And it's okay to pair him up with somebody. When you draft a quarterback later, it's okay to grab 2 because, if something goes south, you have another option. When you're drafting quarterbacks high, then I don't recommend taking another quarterback unless you need 2 in your league. For whatever reason that would be. Now, it's obviously 2 quarterback league, you have to. But if it's a 1 quarterback league, and the way your league works is there won't be quarterbacks in the waiver wire. Then if you spend a high pick, then of course spending one, round quarterback 20 is not bad business either. All right. So one last thing about Richardson, I'm going to point this out again for those that haven't heard my analysis of this. So my expectation of the Indianapolis offense is this. First of all, Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly are both in their 20s. They had been elite linemen. Both were a little bit down last year. There could have been injuries, about players just don't lose it in their 20s. That's so rare. I think there were some external factors. I expect, they are going to step back up this year to at least a degree, if not all the way. But second, they currently have 5 tight ends on their roster. Now, maybe they don't keep 5, but as I say, they have the personnel to run 2 and 3 tight end sets with an RPO-based offense and an immensely mobile and strong quarterback. Whether Jonathan Taylor plays or not, Richardson is going to have phenomenal opportunity. Remember, NFL defenses right now, they are designed to defend the pass. There's been lighter personnel more than ever on defenses because speed is what defenses need to compete. Just like the Atlanta Falcons, I expect the Colts to be going against the tide. But you can take advantage of those lighter bodies when you're putting the heaviest of personnel. So even if they have an extra body in the box, it's not that big of a deal because you have the blocking to support it. But B, the other thing is the second level is like compressed. And a player like Richardson, if he gets past that second level, you could see some splendidly long runs. All right, let's go to Javonte Williams. So look, Javonte Williams is going to play in Saturday's preseason game. I mean, how can it not be great news? You have a player, maybe not a franchise back, but certainly an amazing running back when he's at his best. And the fact that the team is going to put him on the field in a preseason game, that has to tell me that they feel he is good to go. I don't think you risk him in any way unless you feel confident. So this is great news. Now, look, Samaje Perine is in the picture. And even though it's a different coaching staff, Javonte Williams was a rotational back with Melvin Gordon. And apparently when Samaje Perine quickly signed with the Broncos, Sean Payton did have a role set for him. So I do think Perine is going to have a substantial role. But look, Javonte Williams is an explosive running back. I don't know how high his ADP goes up, but if we're looking at Williams running the ball, catching the ball, 15 touches a game as an RB2 all day long. Let's see if I have a question real quick here. Richardson. So the interception, I'll talk about this because Rich is important. So with Richardson, we don't know if he's a good passer. Tim Tebow is a horrific passer. And again, he was a QB1 when he played. We had that staple has been out there for a long time. So, yeah, he might throw some interceptions. But here's what's going to happen. My guess is when they're going to load up super heavy personnel, there's going to be light secondaries because teams have to commit extra bodies to the run. I expect Richardson to take a lot of deep shots into single coverage. Deep shots they're low completion rate, but they're low risk because if you're throwing the ball, overthrowing her to the sideline, they're tougher passes to pick off. I don't know how many structured passes in the offense they're going to do that aren't like real easy. Now, Richardson throws too many passes at the same speed, but I think the menu is going to be they're going to stretch the field. They're going to run and they're going to stretch the field. And I think they'll manipulate him into looks he's comfortable with. But I think the team is well aware of his limitations as a passer. And I fully expect them to be very careful. But that, again, I said with the offensive line, I fully expect Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly. You just do not go from being a great lineman to losing it in your 20s. There were either injuries, external factors, but I can't see a world where either one or both of them don't come back. And Bernard Raymond, the left tackle, he got a lot of heat from a nationally televised game. As the season went on, he was actually improving. So that line, and their run blocking was better than their pass blocking. I don't think we're worried about pass blocking with Anthony Richardson. He'll just knock people over, run around him. So, yeah, I'm very excited about Anthony Richardson as a quarterback 9, okay? Quarterback 9, or 10, quarterback 10, excuse me, outside the top 9. All right, so at RotoWire, we've got something new for all the DFS players out there, probably you, right? So we have a new and improved NFL DFS league lineup optimizer. You can use about 30 different customization options to build winning lineups at a fraction of the cost of our competitors' optimizers. Preseason and week 1 slates are live now, so make sure you are checking that out. Very exciting times with our optimizer. All right, more news. T. Higgins of the Bengals. Now, he's been sitting out some drills in practice. The overall report seems to be it's precautionary, not injury, though. The team wants to get a long-term deal done with him. This is pretty cool. They lock up Burrow. They're going to try to get, the trio. They're going to keep the band together. I think they realize they have something special here. And I think they're going to figure out a way to make it happen. They have done very well drafting on defense, young guys, bringing them in, some cheaper veterans. And I think they're going to be able to pull this off. But anyway, right now, Higgins' absence seems to be make sure he's kept healthy. Let's make sure he gets this contract extension done, and let's move from there. So T. Higgins wheels up. Remember, you look at his stats last year, not so smart. Because he had those 2 games. You look at season-long stats. Because he had the 2 games where he had the pregame injuries. He played a total of 11 snaps. So that really made his overall line look not so great. But T. Higgins, he did have some down games in the second half. I'm not going to lie about it. I think whatever injury it was, it impacted him a bit. But this is like a legitimate 1,200-yard receiver. All right, let's see here. All right, let's see what we got next. Cole Kmet. So the Bears, look, they bring in Robert Tonyan. I get it. And I don't know why there's a blocking tight end. He's not fantasy relevant, and that's why I'm not all over the name, but they have a blocking tight end as well. So they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. That doesn't automatically mean that we're going to see just Cole Kmet and Robert Tonyan out there. When they're going into the more heavier run 2 tight end sets, I think the blocking tight end, again, I'm sorry, I don't have his name. He's not fantasy relevant. And Tonyan will be in there when they're a little more pass friendly out of 2 tight end sets, because there isn't always an advantage of passing out of 2 tight end sets when you have a defense that commits to the run at that point. Kmet is expected after his contract extension to be a core part of the offense. I know that he's viewed very poorly in the fantasy community. I think he's going as tight end 18 roughly right now. Look, with Cole Kmet 2 years ago, he had like 93 targets, and he was really showing 12 games of Justin Fields. He was really showing chemistry with him. Then last year, the Bears offense was in the Stone Age for about 4 weeks. And then Kmet stepped up with a big run of touchdowns. But then when they lost Darnell Mooney, the receiver, the offense was really weaponless. So teams could actually pay attention to Kmet. With DJ Moore, with Mooney, with the anticipation of the Bears having to throw the ball to see what they have in their quarterback, I believe Cole Kmet is a steal at his ADP. I believe he can compete for the top 12 tight ends. Now, that's not much. A top 12 tight end, that doesn't mean you have a great season. That means you might get 540 yards and 5 or 6 touchdowns. But that even puts you in tight end 6 range, and that range is so compressed. But if you need a second tight end or you really punted it, don't sleep on Kmet. Chase Claypool is the other big body as a receiver. Kmet's a tight end. But Claypool, again, is dealing with more injuries. Kmet may be the only reliable big body they have to catch the ball. And so they may need him. Like I said, Claypool, the receiver, if he's not healthy, very, very big problem there, right? All right. RotoWire Fantasy Football Draft Kit. The app, it's up to the minute cheat sheet, news source. We all need when we're on the clock. If you're like me and you put players into tiers to prep for drafts, the app lets you do that too. So check that out and see why it's currently the #1 ranked paid sports app in the Apple Store. So go ahead and grab the RotoWire Fantasy Football Draft Kit app. Thank you, Jonesy. Mercedes Lewis. Thank you. They're the 39-year-old Mercedes Lewis. Yeah, I appreciate that. I just, because they had another guy and they brought in Lewis. They signed him like a month ago. So thank you for that. Yeah, Mercedes Lewis will be definitely used in the block. He's so good. So good. Was he 6'9"? He's like a wall. All right. A little more news here before I get to the topics of the day. Breece Hall back at practice. He's not guaranteeing he'll be ready for week 1. He says he's confident. They bring in Dalvin Cook. I mean, writing on the wall, smoke, there's fire. I don't think Breece Hall's going to get fired up for 20 carries in week 1. Can he get 15? Probably. I think that if you have him on your fantasy team and you're starting 2 running backs in a flex, I think even if you don't know what his workload's going to be, I think you definitely start him. At this point, I think Breece Hall, if he's on the field, you play him, and you hope that the workload goes up over time. But the fact that Dalvin Cook's there, we really don't know what the team thinks. Was this an insurance move? Was this we're going to manage Hall for much of the season? We don't know what it is. So Hall's ADP, though, reflects that he's not expected to get a full workload. So where you're drafting him, that takes that into account. So you're already understanding that. And then last thing, Brock Purdy of the 49ers, he will no longer have scheduled rest days during practice. So he's ramping up for week 1 with that elbow injury. Remember, he had 2 touchdowns or more in every regular season game he played. I think there's a playoff game where he didn't hit that. They had a big lead, I believe. But anyway, Purdy, I did see the longer he played, teams were focusing a little differently on him. He was throwing some balls behind receivers. He had a couple interception pass types that didn't, get caught. So he did get a little lucky too, but he was very productive. He'll start. He has great weapons. He'll have a full camp as the starter. So again, as a quarterback too, you're taking about 20 quarterbacks off the board. Why not? If it doesn't work out, it's not like you invested a lot in him. But if he makes an adjustment and steps forward, I keep him at the league making an adjustment to him, but it's possible that Shanahan's already built in and accounted for that. So again, quarterback 2, quarterback 20, as I said a moment ago, Why not? All right. So I'm going to talk about within the context of two things: each position in fantasy: quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end. I'm going to go over some trends I learned from the Kings Classic draft this past weekend. But I'm also, as I advertise in the show, I'm going to give you a player outside the top 150 picks that you can target in your fantasy football drafts. So the first trends of the Kings Classic, and because it was a 14-team draft, and many of you playing 12s and 10s, I'm going to frame this so it's relevant to everybody as much as possible. Okay. So now most drafts this year, 2 or 3 quarterbacks are off the board in the first 30 picks. Now, industry drafts with analysts like myself, often quarterbacks go later. And so this was really a litmus test of that to see. And in a way, it was kind of that way. The first quarterback in the Kings Classic did not go off till pick 40. So it was way later than regular drafts. So I don't think that doesn't translate to 90% of the leagues right now. But normally that quarterback would have gone later than that. And then, but once Patrick, now I think this would happen. There's a room, the Jim Brown division of the Kings Classic is one of the sharpest rooms that you will ever see in fantasy football. And so basically what happened was I think people were waiting. All right, who's going to break the seal on the quarterback? And so people were going to wait. And finally at pick 40, whoever picked him was like, all right, that's value. And then the floodgates opened up. In the 5-pick range, we had, all three, the big three were gone. We had Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen. That's in a 5-pick span. And then, all right, then we figure, okay, let's have a little lull till we get the next tier. 6 picks of running backs and receivers, and then it's back on. 4 straight picks, pick 51, 52, 53, 54. We have the next set of 4. We had Lamar, we had Fields, we had Herbert, we had Burrow, the order. They're always flipped in the order. I don't remember the order there, but it was 4 straight picks and the big 7 were off the board. And then, so now it's like some people have Trevor Lawrence and make it a big 8. Some people have Trevor Lawrence just a tick outside of that, which I happen to, but really right after those 4 picks in a row, 3 more picks, and then Lawrence goes off the board. So now, very quickly, 57 picks into the draft, we have the top 8 quarterbacks. And now I'm in a pickle here because I don't pick for another 7 or so picks, maybe a little longer than that. And my fail-safe in drafts is Deshaun Watson. I want one of those top 7. But if I don't get them, then I'm hopeful I can hold out for Watson, who I do believe, again, I keep saying over and over, I believe the speed of the game comes back, and I believe he'll be fine. And so anyway, though, fortunately, he falls to me at 66. Is really beyond that. I was saying earlier, I don't want to use Anthony Richardson in the Kings Classic. I don't, like I said, if I have to, I would have. But I really would like to get a top 9 quarterback. And it worked out. Watson falls to me at 66, and that kind of kills off the tier. And the Kings Classic then reflect this. 10 picks later, somebody took the dart on Tua. And that's a good dart to take at that point because we've seen some real upside. We don't really know with injury. We saw some issues later in the season. It's very convoluted with Tua. But when there's 9 quarterbacks off the board and now you just got to take a scratch to see, Tua is reasonable because if that offense makes a jump this year, that would be a great pick. And then another round later, Kirk Cousins, that's about right. And then yet another round later, Daniel Jones. So they were a trickle. After the top 9 went off the board, the next 3 were trickled off the board. And the Kings Classic nobody took Richardson as a top 12 quarterback. He was taken after that. He was with the grouping later. That's before he was named the week 1 starter. I don't know if that makes a difference. Now, if you're drafting a player outside of the top 150 picks, so if you're in need of this single quarterback league, obviously, right? And so if you need a quarterback outside the top 150, I'm advocating, because these are flyers, right? I'm advocating a flyer on Jordan Love. I believe that, well, obviously he has job security. That's the first thing that's really important. Second thing is a good offensive line. He has a good running game with Aaron Jones and to a degree A.J. Dillon. The weapons may not be Justin Jefferson-esque, but the trio of Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and the rookie Jaden Reed, to me, okay, it's enough to work with. And I do think they're going to use heavy personnel and give Jordan loves some smart throws. He's shown some ability to run with the football. So I think outside the top 150, if you need a quarterback too, just to get the backup, because in some leagues you don't take a second quarterback, but in those leagues where most everybody does and you got to follow suit, again, Jordan Love outside the top 150. I just think it's a calculated gamble. I'm not saying he's going to be great, but there's potential that he could be good. And if not, you wait 3 weeks. Oh, terrible. Then just dust them off and go to the waiver wire. All right, running backs in the Kings Classic and what I learned, and then I'll talk about stuff that applies to everybody. So, like many drafts, running backs are not going like they used to. We used to see 8 or so running backs go in the first round of a draft. So the Kings Classic a little heavier, 5 running backs in the first 10 picks. So this year we're seeing like mostly receivers. We might see a couple or a few running backs in those 10 picks, maybe 3, but we went 5. And that was part of the problem there. I took Nick Chubb. I feel that, you've heard me talk on and on about Nick Chubb and the expectation of 11 personnel, 3 receivers, spread the field, give him a chance to see light boxes for the first time in his career on a consistent basis. So again, 5 running backs in the first 10. And then, but here's where it really settles in. 28 picks in the draft, there were only 12 running backs off the board. So as you see, it's not a typical year. It definitely in your home league, you're going to see a emphasis on wide receivers early. Now, where do you take Jonathan Taylor? Okay, so it depends on your league. If you're playing in a 12-team league with your friends and you're not connected to other leagues, Taylor has risk. We don't know his true stance on whether he's going to play, if there are going to be issues with his contract situation. If he gets a nick, if he's just like, I'm done, not playing. All this is in play. It's also in play that he gets on the field. He's in a contract year. Technically, it's his 4th year. And so it's possible he goes all out to see if he can get himself a payday. And anyway, if you're in your 12-team league, home league, there's risk. And if you don't want to take that risk, just say, all right, he's somebody else's problem and let them draft him. In the Kings Classic, look, for me, it's a very important league. And to win this league, to me, it's a major deal. And I'm competing with the best analysts in the world. And so he falls to pick 20. Now, here's my decision. It's like, you know what? If I'm not in first place, I'm in last. It's 14-team league. Running backs are scarce. 20 picks off the board. If he was healthy, he would be going by pick 13, 14, right around there. So I took Taylor at 20 because of the magnitude of the league. Look, I would scratch and claw to keep competitive if he doesn't play, but that gives me, I believe, an edge on the field if he does. That's why I took him. So understand the risk associated. Now, so again, 14-team league, only 14 running backs were taken in the first 38 picks. So this year we've identified in most drafts who the running back dead zone players are, like after the first few rounds. So J.K. Dobbins, and he has no leverage in his contract talks. It looks like he's a good bet to play. He's healthy. I think he is a steal where he's going well outside those top 14 backs. You can get him as the rounds pass by a bit. I think he's a very good value. I think James Cook, the buzz, I think is warranted. I believe that even if the Bills try putting 2 tight ends on the field, defenses are not going to put extra bodies in the box. They are going to be worried about Josh Allen, the passing attack. They know if Dalton Kincaid is out there, they know he's a receiver. He's not a blocker. So I believe that James Cook is going to have plenty of yards before contact. The team has really moved him ahead in the depth chart to where he's the guy. And then, of course, he'll get plenty of help, especially from Damian Harris, to take some of those grinder carries. But Cook can catch the ball. His workload ramped up as the season went on. So I do think he's still a steal in drafts. You can get him somewhere in the later 70s in many drafts in terms of picks. Rachaad White's going in the dead zone. I'm off of him. But for those that think he's going to have the 3-down opportunity, Morton Albert, you definitely go with that. I think that he can't break tackles. He's too lean in the legs. And I think that that's going to be a surprise of a committee that comes out of that. But again, if you like him, draft him. Alvin Kamara is going in that dead zone. He's going up a bit since it was only a 3-game suspension. But I saw a lot of decline in his game. He's not getting the targets he got. He's being used more as a runner. I think that he's not aging gracefully. He's 28 now. Again, at that point of the draft, though, as a running back 3, I don't see a problem. He's going to get work. he still is good enough. And the Saints' interior line is not what I'd like it to be, but I think there'd be enough for him to be an RB3, so I don't know qualms there. Isaiah Pacheco's interesting. We know that he is good when he's on the field. The issue I have is he runs to contact consistently, and off season he had wrist and shoulder, I believe, hand and shoulder surgeries, I believe. And to me, that was a byproduct of his running style. And then Cam Akers and James Conner are going in that dead zone. Antonio Gibson, I got to pick 93. So there are plenty of options if you fade running backs early. Player you could target outside the top 150, I'm not going to give you the same answer I give you every time. Gus Edwards. He is off an ACL, just like Dobbins was last year. People gave Dobbins the benefit of the doubt. Nobody gave it to Gus Edwards. Yet when he was on the field, he missed the first 6 weeks of the year. He was very, very effective. And I know they want to pass more, but there's still going to be enough running production for 2 running backs. And should Dobbins get hurt, Edwards is the guy. So outside the top 50, go there. If you have 2 free days of RotoWire access, no credit card needed, give me an email address on the site. Go to rotowire.com/Jim. Give them the email address, not me. And not a lot I can do with that. All right, wide receivers. And I got a few minutes till Joe Bartle comes in, so I'll make a couple quick points here. As it has been in most drafts, the wide receivers are going fast. 10 go in the first 18 picks. What was interesting was I thought this was the value. Now, you hear me say Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's not a top 10 pick, but he's a top 15 pick. And he goes at the 14-15 turns a 14-team league. Perfect value for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just can't, and I know there's vibes around Davante Adams. I just can't take St. Brown before Davante Adams. And personally for me, again, Garrett Wilson, I believe, is a superstar, 1,100 yards, which is basically Brown's production, but this year he gets Aaron Rodgers, and Garrett Wilson didn't have that last year. So I think, again, that's the way to go. But anyway, overall, wide receivers of value, I'm continuing to note. Chris Godwin picked 79, and he was coming off an ACL from December of 2021 last year. He also was still a 72nd percentile yards after the catch. Baker Mayfield, and I want you to remember this, before he tore up his shoulder in 2021, Jarvis Landry averaged almost 1,000 yards a season with him. Godwin will play a lot of, he'll play outside too, but he'll play slot as well. And that's the type of receiver that clicks with Mayfield. Elijah Moore went just outside the top 100 picks. He was going around 90 earlier. Don't know why he's fading, but they are using him all over the place in Browns camp. Don't forget, in his last 6 games, I think, of his 2021 rookie season, he averaged 5 catches, 76 yards, I believe, and he scored in 5 of 6 games. He is the deal. He's going to be utilized. They're using him even on the outside. Elijah Moore, I believe, is a steal. And then Rashad Bateman is an interesting choice because I told you the other day that I learned from a beat writer that cortisone shot had to do with the screw, not the injury. And apparently the screw was supposed to come out. So if that was the case, he's getting knocked down because the belief that I actually had until I learned that was that shot was injury related, and apparently it's not. And then high floor, I keep talking up Juju Smith-Schuster after pick 115 because he's going to get targets in that offense, RPO-based, Bill O'Brien calling the shots. I do believe now he is in a system where he will fit. Patrick Mahomes, yeah, he was with Mahomes, but Mahomes always wants something a little more downfield. So a lot of times Juju is checked off. Outside the top 150, take a shot at Alec Pierce. I talked earlier. Richardson's going to throw the ball deep. Alec Pierce can win deep, but Matt Ryan couldn't throw the ball deep anymore. So that was kind of the problem there. So that's a great outside the top 150. A little boom bust, but he's going to get deep shots, and he is a good boundary downfield receiver. Tight ends, it's pretty basic the way I went in the Kings Classic, typical. The only thing, and I want to point this out, Dallas Goedert's falling for some reason. I've seen it in 3 different drafts recently. They were in important drafts. He may not fall in the home league. 8 tight ends were off the board, and Goedert was still available. Evan Ingram was gone. Dalton Schultz was gone. I get it with Waller and Pitts and Hopkins. I get that. I get the top 5. Kittle, I get it. Top 5, top 6. But Goedert falling to 9. I was at a point in the draft where I had Goedert, and I love James Conner. And I could have used a 3rd running back there, but I'm like, the value on Goedert at pick 76 was too good to pass. He gets hurt, right? But when he's on the field last year, he was really good. And it's not like he's a chronic injury guy. So I think there's a chance he plays, a full slate of games. But if he misses some when he's on the field, he's so productive. I think you deal with it. And then just right around pick 100, David Njoku went as the 10th tight end. Pat Freiermuth fell a little later than usual at pick 101. But these are Freiermuth will go a little earlier. Dalton Schultz, I thought, went pretty high. But some people like him. I think he's a catch and fall guy. And I know people have that narrative about the rookie quarterback and the tight end. And I get all that. But I think that ultimately in Houston, CJ Stroud is more of a perimeter thrower. And I think he's going to be comfortable throwing there. But anyway, for tight ends, if you see Goddard falling, I'm not missing something, right? I am not. Dallas Goedert is an excellent player, and he's like their third receiver. I know they will play 3 receiver sets, but Dallas Goedert is totally their third receiver, and he will be using that offense. And their schedule, Philly had an easy schedule last year. And last year, they would come out passing heavy, and then many games they were leading at the half, and they would put their foot on the brake, and they would go to the running game. I don't know. I really expect this year a tougher schedule. I think they're going to be in more competitive games. And I do think it's going to be a bit of an issue for them. Waiting for Joe Bartle to come in here, and let me see if I've got anything from Joe. And but as we go through this, I'm very excited as we go through this preseason. Remember, we're going to be off Thursday and Friday. I'm still have more shows here, so don't leave. But this weekend we have great guests. I have Jay Felicio coming on. Very excited about that. Saturday, and then Sunday I have Darren Armani, my good friend from Fantasy Mojo, who does my ADP stuff. He does not for me. He does it for him and his site. But again, it's always like last few days ADP. So that's the way to go there. And I'm just trying to Joe Barlow. Oh, he wants a StreamYard link, and I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. Let me see real quick. Sorry, I'm gonna chatter here for a minute, trying to get Joe the link here, and let's see what we can do here. Sorry about this, everybody. And I'm going to get Joe Bartle in here in a moment. Outside of that, I talked about Anthony Richardson earlier. I don't know how much downside we necessarily have with him. It may not be much because, again, when you're a running quarterback, I really do believe that you have the ability to have that high floor. And we've seen it time and again. And so I think, again, outside those top 9 quarterbacks, you want to take your shot with him there. And Joe's going to be in a second here. Now, Joe Bartle's with RotoWire, and you can follow him on Twitter as he comes on at JB Fantasy Sports. I did the off-season podcast with Joe on the RotoWire podcast. He did a very nice job. Joe's a very good analyst. I did forget to give you, though, the top one, I would say the 150 player to target at tight end, and that would be Jake Ferguson. And actually in high-stakes leagues, he's shooting up the draft board. I keep saying that a quarterback with Dak Prescott, tight end with Dak Prescott always does well because Dak reads the field extremely well. And when Dak does that, he's able to go to 4th reads, 5th reads, but he loves navigating the middle in the zones. And Ferguson, limited work, he showed 79th percentile yards after the catch ability. And that's exactly what Dalton Schultz was not. He was catch and fall. But now Ferguson can actually turn those into some very useful looks. So very excited to see what he's able to do. But I think Jake Ferguson outside the top 150, you just drop him if you don't like him. So very easy with that. Other than that, the players we're going to talk about with Joe are going to be Kyle Pitts, and Joe's coming in now. Welcome on, Joe. I gave your introduction already.
Good.
Where you work, but I wanted to kind of keep people engaged as we were getting past the bottom of the hour. Joe, I'm going to bring you in. Just tell everybody how everything's going before we start you off on your players.
Yeah, not too bad. Obviously, it's the thick of the season for both of us. Obviously, excited to hear how everything went at the Fantasy Expo, and you've been doing all those drafts. It's the same type of thing for me too, where we have the Stake League going on and the Beat Joe Burrow Online Championship from this past week as well, and lots and lots of drafts. I'm hoping 20. That's the goal this year, which is 5 more than I normally would. So lots of work going on, but this is the best time, and I love talking draft strategy specifically and targeting different players. That's really my bread and butter and has been one of my favorite things for the past 8 years working here at RotoWire.
So, Joe, when I have guests come in on this show, it's to help people figure out on draft day some players that you're targeting and explaining why to give them some intel so they can make a good approach on draft day. And so the first tight end actually the only tight end you're going to talk about in this show is Kyle Pitts, who's going off the board as the tight end 6. Tell everybody what you like about Kyle Pitts, and where you would draft him among the top 6 tight ends.
Yeah, I guess I'm ready to make the same mistake for a third consecutive year. I wrote about in the Beat Joe Bartle online championship that we did last week. That was my third consecutive year in the NFFC format, drafting Kyle Pitts. I finished top 250 my first year doing it, finished dead last and one of the lowest scorers the second year doing it. And in both those cases, it was around that 5th or 6th range from an ADP perspective. This year, I got Kyle Pitts in the 7th round. I talked about my article that I had to take him over one of the receivers that we'll probably mention a little bit later on that I liked. I'm truly fine punting at tight end. Like, I want to take a quarterback high. We've talked about that in our early March and May podcasts. I'm really adamant that I'm building my roster that way. And if I'm building my roster, taking a quarterback high, and I'm going to be having running backs and wide receivers that I like quite a bit, which I do, something has to give. So typically, if I'm not taking Kyle Pitts, I'm going Irv Smith or Sam Laporta. Jake Latarsky and I on our Tuesday podcast talked Luke Musgrave. I'm not going that far low as my starting tight end, but I'm considering just about every option past 12. But there's the upside play that Kyle Pitts presents that I don't think there's any other tight end that has that option. Like Mark Andrews, fine. If you think Todd Monken's offense is going to make Mark Andrews better, I think you're wrong. But I understand that concept. He's still a 3rd-round price tag. Dallas Goedert, I think, is maxed out in the Eagles' office. TJ Hawkinson. There's a lot of questions, I think, if the Vikings offense were to be most efficient, is TJ Hawkinson really getting the ball? There are no reservations about Kyle Pitts. The only reservations is Arthur Smith going to get his head out of his ass? I mean, like, when you have a 6'6" wide receiver, because that's what he is, Arthur Smith, he's not tight end, stop making a block. If you have a 6'6" wide receiver and he's getting close to 100 targets, 120 targets in a season, you have Drake London and nothing else, even if you are run-oriented and using Desmond Ridder as a mobile quarterback, there's still enough opportunity for 25, 30 targets in a game, not every game, but in a game, and Kyle Pitts should be commanding most of those. If that's the case, and if Arthur Smith uses Kyle Pitts the way he should, we are talking about a tight end that gets drafted in round 2, 3, 4 next year and finally makes good on the type of hype that he had as a rookie, which, oh, by the way, wasn't bad. 1,000 yards receiving for a rookie tight end is nothing to sneeze at. So he's one of those guys, especially in the middle rounds. You're looking for the boom players. Yes, they will sometimes let you down too, and Kyle Pitts has in past seasons, but he is one of the biggest booms at a position that, other than Travis Kelce, doesn't have a lot offering it.
And when you talk about using Kyle Pitts, well, what I saw last year that was troubling was it was a steady diet of downfield passes. Those are low percentage passes. And a lot of those were from Marcus Mariota. And Marcus Mariota was, as deep passes go, he was incredibly inefficient. Kyle Pitts wasn't getting the layups. They weren't throwing him short and intermediate passes that would allow him to use his athleticism and his wingspan. And it was a very, as you said, poor use of his athletic ability. And hopefully, as you said, Arthur Smith can get that figured out. And if that's the case, if we can see Kyle Pitts used as a full functioning tight end using many routes within the tree, absolutely. Maybe he can't hit Travis Kelce numbers, but he could easily be the number 2 guy. Joe, you broke it down very well. Was there anything else that you wanted to say about Pitts?
No, and I think you covered it to the extent as well. I think when you put it in the context of Travis Kelce, no one's beating Travis Kelce. I'm taking him top 5 if I can. That's the difference maker, but it's the same concept for me. Like, if you believe Travis Kelce is worth not even a top 5 pick, but a first-round pick, then I think you have to understand and recognize what the value for Kyle Pitts is relative to other guys in his range. Again, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert. I'm not even fine. I think Mark Andrews might produce more than Kyle Pitts on a bad year for Kyle Pitts, but Mark Andrews does not live up to the draft hype. So that's where my context lies. And I think, again, from a boom perspective, Kyle Pitts, I'm going again, year 3. Let's do it.
Well, like you said, it's a value in the draft, and you are getting a player at a discount in the hopes that he hits, and I think it's a good risk to take. We're going to talk about a pair of receivers, obviously one at a time. We'll start out with Romeo Doubs, who last year, look, he had a good training camp, and he had moments last year. He had a high ankle sprain that kind of sabotaged part of his season. He's now going off the board. He's not a secret. Wide receiver 52, pick 114. Earlier in the summer, he was going significant later. But that draft, it's like, and all my drafts, I see him going somewhere around that 10th or so round. So he's really moved up. But Joe, sell the audience on Romeo Doubs and why he'll be a bigger factor this year.
What I'm hearing is you're not taking him at that round, Jim. So how dare you? I guess I need to sell you as well
No,
too.
no, no. I'm just pointing out to
We've
the audience, Joe, because the audience was used to getting him later, but
Sure.
the ADP sharpens up in August. It really does. And so I always try to point that to the audience that, if a player has moved, I want them to know that. So that's all that was.
Yeah, and we've talked about it on the podcast again, early in draft season, really in the offseason in the NFL. During that first 7-game stretch, Romeo Doubs was the Packers' number one wide receiver. Christian Watson was getting injured and catching balls off his face. One play touchdowns, they dropped. There was inconsistencies in his game. Allen Lazard stayed healthy at times. He missed a couple of games to begin the season, but really never materialized as that guy to replace Davante Adams. Randall Cobb got injured right away. So Doubs, as a rookie, was already the team's top target. You had all the talk during last year's training camp that Rodgers loves him. There's the speed element. And I think the Packers utilized Romeo Doubs as a rookie receiver in the sense that they weren't asking him to do too much. There wasn't any rollout plays where he's extending it or trying to get open. There wasn't instances where they're scheming deep shots for Romeo Doubs. That was Christian Watson, and a good role for Christian Watson at that. There's a development angle that I'm thinking Romeo Doubs will have in year 2. But even if you just say he will produce what he did last year for the entire season, he had the high ankle sprain that kept him up from end of October until beginning of December. It was 5 weeks. By that point, when he came back, Allen Lazard, Cobb were healthy. You had Christian Watson finally coming into form more. Doubs was the fourth option. But even if you project that out, let's just say he gets those earlier targets that extend, we're thinking around 65, 70 catches for 750 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns. That might not seem great. And I'll put this into context for you now as well for Jordan Addison, who we'll talk about later. That was wide receiver 30 numbers on ESPN scoring system. So wide receiver 30 isn't one of those guys that you're waffling between. You might not be happy, but he's in your starting lineup just about every week if you have a wide receiver 30. So at minimum, if the floor is wide receiver 30 numbers, I think you're happy even as a 10th round selection. I would have loved it more as a 14th rounder when he was going in that range when we were talking about different times, but 10th round makes sense to me. I think there's room for his game and to grow. And we saw it in week 1 preseason matchup. I know it's against third string defenses, yada, yada. Jordan Love looks settled as a quarterback. Again, if you think Jordan Love is awful, don't go with the Romeo Doubs selection. I think take every under you can in the Packers win total as well, too. You can make a lot of money if you believe Jordan Love is a very bad quarterback, because I think the Vegas betting line and prop bets are suggesting they're hedging their bets that he could be okay. But I think Doubs is going to be their true number one receiver. And I know we've had Alan Slazowski on different platforms and others saying, Christian Watson, go ahead and draft him in the 4th round. I'm a little bit worried about that. I'm skeptical. Yeah, you are too. I see the thumbs down. You're skeptical of that notion. That's fine. I think Christian Watson's going to be involved, but it's not. It's like the Deshaun Jackson first-year Commanders, if you remember that, 1,200 receiving yards, only 55 catches, but he's getting an 80-yard touchdown every single night. You're okay if you're playing Christian Watson. I don't want to get worried about that. It's Doubs that's going to be the guy that I think is in line for 85, 90 catches, and if nothing else, I don't know who on that team is going to. I love Dontavian Wicks. I think he could be something. Not in year 1. Not convinced that's going to happen. Jaden Reed looked really good in that preseason game, but it is just a preseason game, and he's a 2nd-round pick. So if Jaden Reed can't do it, if Dontavian Wicks can't do it, they were already, I think it was 24th in terms of tempo offense last year. So if people are thinking they're going to protect Jordan Love, they're going to run the ball more, how much slower can they really get? I don't see that happening. I think it stays the same, and we see more of Matt LaFleur's offense, which instead of doing some bubble plays to Romeo Doubs is more runs to A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones. That shouldn't sacrifice too much to me. I think Doubs is going to be in that line for 75, 80 catches and over 1,000 yards, which, again, aren't great numbers, but are enough in today's NFL to be a top receiving option for a team.
And remember, Doubs is going off the board just outside the top 50 receivers. Joe is suggesting he could be as high as wide receiver 30. So there's a lot of play in between there. But regardless, even if he's the wide receiver 40, it would be very significant value. You're drafting him as a high-end wide receiver 5. So that's a very small investment for a player who could be a big part of the passing game. And last thing, Joe mentioned Christian Watson. I did a thread on my Twitter today at Jim Coventry after the show. Head on over there and check that out if you want to read what I had to say about Christian Watson. Joe, you're going to go over another receiver here. And I almost wondered if this player's ADP would shoot up in the preseason. It really never did. It stayed static, which is a fine ADP. You're going to be talking about Jordan Addison. He's going off the board as wide receiver 37, which is just outside the top wide receiver 3 range in 12-team leagues. He's going at pick 84. So it's a really good spot in the draft. But Joe, tell us why people should be considering Jordan Addison.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites this year. And in just about every league, I'm going to be pulling the trigger on him. Jake and I did a podcast yesterday. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcast. And our 5 players we're reaching on. We mentioned Nick Chubb. Okay, fine. Well, if you have a first-round pick, you can reach on Nick Chubb, but that's about it, right? Calvin Ridley, same thing. I'm sure you have seen, or you are going to see, Jim, drafts where Calvin Ridley is going to be a second-round pick. When we did our podcast way back when, he was 4th or 5th round. So people are already reaching on Calvin Ridley. I think the same concept needs to happen with Jordan Addison. And of any of the rookie receivers, lots and lots of hype, unwarranted in my mind, is going to Zay Flowers. There's Quentin Johnston stuff too, who has not looked good in training camp. I cover the Chargers here at RotoWire. He's been maddeningly inconsistent, is what I'd describe. It's Jordan Addison, I think, is going to be the guy. And I'm so confident that Jordan Addison is going to be a starting wide receiver in my team that his 8th round ADP, I think, is not just 1 round off, but 2. Like, I would be comfortable taking him in the 6th round, depending on my roster construction. So along with the Miles Sanders, Cam Akers, James Conner running backs, I think they've probably even fallen a bit further. Jordan Addison belongs in that territory for me. The reason why his ADP, I don't think, has risen quite yet is because we're doing that dumb thing where we punish rookies. And I don't know why coaches do this, other than they like to make us frustrated and like to make the rookie player frustrated. But we had that report that KJ Osborne is the starting receiver for the Vikings on their opening depth chart. Fine. If that's going to be the case, then you can have McDonald, whatever his name is, the head coach, lose his job, much like Mike Zimmer did when he tried to stifle Justin Jefferson in year 1. And by week 3, he had to play the rookie because his offense looked so bad. I truly believe, again, Adam Thielen is my baseline for this. He was wide receiver 30 last year, 70 catches, 716 yards, and he's there 6 or 7 touchdowns. He played most of the season, but it wasn't anything like the 2 previous all-pro years with the Vikings where he had 12 touchdowns and 14 touchdowns. He still similarly had the receiving yards, but it was the touchdowns. I think the offense, and Thielen played 999 offensive snaps last year. Let's just say Addison plays 750. And you have KJ Osborne playing more, like to replicate or to stick along with what the Vikings having KJ Osborne as leading receiver or starting receiver. That's fine enough. Like, you don't have to have 1,000 snaps to translate into Adam Thielen numbers because Addison is going to be a better player. He was already uniquely good in college. I know everyone's talking about last year, but then we kind of just ignore what he did even when he was younger, which is not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to have Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison be the top 2 receivers in the country as I think it was true sophomore and a redshirt freshman. Like, that doesn't happen in the in college football, especially at the level that they were playing at. So I'm confident Jordan Addison, now healthy, in an offense that, oh, by the way, needs him to be the top receiving target or one of, to help Justin Jefferson, to make that defense, which is a little bit sketchy. Remember, cut Zadarius Smith this offseason. They have Brian Flores, but that's about the only big addition I feel like they made. They need the offense to be able to withstand any blows the defense might give up. I think Jordan Addison is about a 1,000-yard receiver. I haven't seen many over-unders on him yet, but I'm going to smash every over I can from a player prop perspective, and I love his ADP even in the 6th round, much less the 8th.
And really, how much running are they going to do? Alexander Madison's 3.5 yard per carry guy in the last 2 years. That's all he is. He's not a good back. He's going to be their lead back because nobody's stepping up in camp. So even I can't see a world where, like, yeah, we're going to go in and try to run the ball early till the game's out of hand. No, they're going to have to come out throwing because they don't have the ability to sustain a run game, I don't think. Their line was good, but I don't think Madison can carry the mail for any long period of time. And no offense for those that are drafting Madison. He'll get volume. Volume is king in fantasy football, so he'll get enough volume to be okay for you. But I'm not expecting much. If any of those running backs step up, there could be a committee. But back to Joe's point, Addison should be in a high volume passing attack. And just like, remember Justin Jefferson, I think you mentioned this, Justin Jefferson was like behind
Chad Beebe.
Yeah, BC Johnson.
Yes.
Old BC Johnson. Yeah. He was behind him. And so, yeah, that's fine. But that was Zimmer. Hopefully it goes away quicker here. But, yeah, I love the call on Addison. He should, by volume, be easily able to blow away his ADP. You have one more for us, Joe, at running back. So in the last 5 days, Travis Etienne. It's kind of settled here, though. He's going as the running back 16, pick 46. So he is out of the RB1 range. There was a while he was getting drafted a little more aggressively, but right now I think there's a real interesting spot for his draft value. Joe, tell us why you like Travis Etienne as the running back 16, pick 46.
Yeah, if his ADP is settled, it's because I haven't been enough drafts, clearly. We did the RotoWire Vegas draft. I took him at the beginning of the third round on the turn. I was number one pick. I'm still confident with where that ADP has lied. And obviously now, as we get a bit more value, that's fine with me. So Ramondre Stevenson is in that same category. I think Breece Hall has been a little bit lower, right? But kind of in that same range in terms of ADP. It's an uglier spot if you're trying to get your first running back, and I recognize that. I myself am confident going down with the ship and making my Travis Etienne running back 1. I did do that in our stake league draft. I felt like I had a pretty good price for him, but I recognize if it makes others a little bit nervous. So if you're not going running back, if you're not going Etienne in that range, going receiver is totally fine. I'm not going to argue with that. But let's just make the case for Etienne being a guy that next year we're considering among the top 14, top 16, right? The Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, pre-Jim Irsay range, the Nick Chubb range. I think Etienne can get to that point. I recognize that Tank Bigsby is there. The Jaguars invested some capital in him. We can ignore different times where the 49ers have drafted third-round running backs and have done nothing over consecutive seasons. I don't think the third-round pick thing means much to Etienne, but let's just go under that premise. Bigsby was taken high. He's going to be a factor. I want Etienne touching the ball less. I thought Etienne was best when James Robinson was involved in that offense last year before they traded him to the Jets. Obviously, Etienne had close to 30 touches post-trade because the Jaguars really had nothing else offensively. But year 3 of Etienne, really second year post that foot break as well that kept him on his rookie year, makes a difference for me. And it's an offense that is only going to get better, right? Calvin Ridley now on that team. You still have Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk. Everything that made that team already a top 15, top 12 offense last season's there, except with Calvin Ridley added. And they played the AFC South, obviously, but the NFC South. I mean, you're talking about 8 games this year where the Jaguars, if they don't have a top offensive outing, it's because somebody got hurt or something went dramatically wrong. And Etienne's going to be a part of that as a pass catcher, as a runner as well, too. Again, if you're factoring in Bigsby as a guy that's taking away some workload, okay. I don't believe that's going to be a significant issue. And I'm very confident taking Etienne as my running back 1, assuming he's getting 15 to 18 touches, not that he's getting to the 20 to 25 post James Robinson trade. I think less touches, more efficiency is how I would describe all of the Jaguars offense now with Calvin Ridley. And I feel very confident that Etienne is going to be, especially in full point PPR leagues, a comfortable starting 1 running back for you.
You know, from a schematic approach, adding Ridley does a lot for everybody because they really didn't have anything on the outside. Yeah, I liked Zay Jones. I was heavily invested in him, but I knew what he was. He wasn't able to make defenses fair. Marvin Jones was a deep threat who couldn't run anymore. So that's kind of not working so much. So bringing in Ridley, though, defenses really have to play them 30 yards across. They got to play them all the way. They got to play them all the way across the field now because they could win but that spreads the field potentially out for Etienne. And with the explosive ability he has, and remember, and he didn't get many, he didn't have more than 3 catches in any game, but he's like 9.1 yards per reception, which is really
good at it.
Yeah, over 5 yards per carry. And if you spread the field a little bit more, which you're going to be able to do, he really can do a lot more, like Joe said, even if the volume is not where we would like to see him. But again, you're getting him as the running back 16. You got to reach up a little bit to get him if you're going to go. But that is, I do think this is a value in that offense is going to work out for him. Joe, tell everybody what you have going on, including the podcast, so that people can keep up and follow you in your work.
Yeah, every Tuesday we have the RotoWire NFL podcast. Jake Latarski and I, during the season, are going to be talking about your waiver wire pickups, guys to target, how to manage your fab budget, waiver wire priority. That's really been our thing. You mentioned it, Justin Jefferson. I only remember that so vividly because that was really our claim to fame 2 years ago. Was week 3, Mike Zimmer made sure everyone should drop Justin Jefferson, and we were saying no, pick him up. Same with Cordell Patterson, Jamal Williams last year too. Like, we've been on those guys as soon as you possibly can. And it's been, I think, really beneficial for the listeners. So that's during the season. We're not at the during season part yet, Jim, and I know we're both looking forward to that. I think it's not next week, but the week after, we're going to be doing our over-unders win totals for every single NFL team. That's been a huge money maker. I think We hit 65% last year win rate. And then the year before was around the same spot, especially factoring in some player props. So I love doing that podcast. That's great. That's in 2 weeks. And again, during the season, getting covered for the weekly waiver wire shows. I do a number of different media hits. Obviously, I'm talking with you now, Jim, but I do a few radio shows. You can listen to those on JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. I have a lot of my draft strategy articles already up. I don't anticipate doing much more of that. But the other thing is every Friday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, I do the SiriusXM radio show with Mario Puig. I always call myself a disciple of Mario, so I'm really just teeing him up to get all the necessary takes out. And I know you've worked with Mario extensively. You know how it goes, but I love doing that show. I'll be filling in at different times throughout the season too. Often I feel like our Jim Erickson or Jeff Erickson and Nick Whalen duo on Thursdays likes to watch the Thursday game. So I'm happy to hop in and do the fill in and talk about the games as they're going on. It's a lot of fun. This is what we do now, Jim, until the end of February. It's a lot of football coverage. I'll be reading your stuff extensively, but a lot of you're hearing me talk about it. That's where you can find me on Twitter at JB Fantasy Sports, not X. Sorry, Elon, I don't care what you have to say. And elsewhere as well, too, on the written form. So I appreciate you letting me come on, Jim.
Yeah, definitely give Joe a follow. He already told you multiple times, but at JB Fantasy Sports, make sure you're subscribing to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, and especially making sure you're listening to Joe and Jake's show, especially also in addition to the preseason, the regular season, like you said, the waiver wire show is gold. So make sure you're doing that. Joe, appreciate you talking football with me. I always enjoy it. Thanks to everyone in the audience for hanging out with us today. And join me again Saturday. Remember, we take off Thursday and Friday. Man's got to have a day off now and again. My guest will be Jay Felicio, G-Man, Jay on Twitter. Have a great day, everyone.